Hello and good evening to all of our individuals that are viewing us live here on tonight on Facebook, on YouTube, and who have tuned in to Twitter Live, and then to all of our registrants who have registered tonight for our Third Thursday Talks. I want to welcome each and every one of you. Tonight is a very special night. Tonight we get a chance to share with us. We just hear recently have we just recently here have just experienced some great news within our country, wherein you have the signing into legislation for Juneteenth being made a national holiday. But also today it marks the sixth. It makes the 6 year anniversary. It makes the 6 year anniversary of the mass shooting that took place in Charleston, South Carolina, where 9 African Americans were killed during Bible study at the Emmanuel AME Church. And yet, like an uncontrollable disease, gun violence appears to rage on. And here locally in South Florida, the news yet of more gun violence, where 23 people were shot and three were dead. Three were dead in that shooting at the El Mula Banquet Hall. And then the following day, to find that yet another shooting took place there in Kendall, where 5 was shot and 3 were dead in that particular incident at the Hookah Inn Lounge in Kendall, Florida, and even the Turnpike shooting. And I can go on and on about the various shootings that we have here recently experienced. And it is to that end that we have on this third Thirsty Talks that we have very prestigious panel, here on tonight, where we're getting ready to just dialogue and to talk about gun violence, our youth. Here on tonight, allow me the opportunity to take and to introduce briefly our panel here on today. And we're grateful and extremely honored to have with us former Congressman Kendrick Meek. Yes, sir. Hey, Johnson, how you doing? We'll bring you on in a minute, sir. We're going to allow me to introduce. Who do we have here that keeps interrupting? All right, so let's allow me to go ahead with our introductions here on today. Again, we have with us our former Congressman Kendrick Meek. He's the son of our retired Congresswoman Carrie P. Meek and Harold H. Meek, graduate from Miami School, graduate of Florida A&M University. We will not hold it against them. He is a Omega Psi Phi fraternity, Upsilon Psi chapter. Congressman Meek, how are you doing this evening, sir?
I am outstanding and glad to be on the show. I'm sorry that we are having to talk on this particular topic, but it's a topic worth having a discussion over and hopefully airing out a few solutions.
Absolutely. We're honored and privileged to have you here with us on tonight. Allow me to also introduce another of our panelists here on this evening, Dr. Shirley Planton. She's a chief executive consultant for U-Turn Youth Consulting, author of the Backstory of New Reality, and its supplemental work. Hold up, Pastor Johnson, we can see you, sir, and we can hear you, sir. I'm going to mute you for now, sir. I'm introducing all of our panelists, sir. Give me 1 second here. Okay, excuse me a minute there. Pastor Johnson, we see you. We got you. All right. Let me do this. All right. So Dr. Planton, excuse me, she is our she's a consultant for U-Turn Youth Consulting, author, Backstory of a New Reality, and its supplemental workbook. She also facilitates training and workshops for systems, educational, criminal justice, healthcare, and social services, unmasking the backstory, and the sectionalities that lead to the school to prison pipeline, the mistrust in law enforcement, and ultimately to the gun violence in urban communities. Commissioner on the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Continuing Justice Commission, Florida Police Chiefs Association Subcommittee on Accountability and Societal Change. And we're grateful, Dr. Planton, that you could join us here on tonight. How are you doing?
I am blessed and highly favored. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the invitation. I am in the middle of greatness, so I'm excited about the conversation.
Awesome, awesome. We're grateful. We're grateful to have you. And then we have he's my leader because he serves as a chair on the for the Miami-Dade County Black Affairs and Advisory Board. Attorney Stephen Hunter Johnson. And Congressman Meek, don't hold it against us, but he is a Kappa man, and he's a graduate. He's a graduate of the University of Miami School of Law. Chair, as I shared earlier, with the Miami-Dade County Black Affairs and Advisory Board, stakeholder in the Lydecker law firm. He's had several honors: super lawyers, rising stars, University of Miami School of Law, Dean Scholar, American Board of Trial Advocates, Bill Colson Trial Award, President of 100 Black Men of South Florida. Attorney Johnson, how are you doing this evening?
I'm wonderful, and I don't even know how one can even hope to live up to the title of a leader for a man like you, Pastor Barber. You know, some folks don't need leadership nor management. You just have to let people do what they do for the benefit of the community. And like my brother Kendrick Meek said, I'm sad and disappointed for the topic, but glad to be here, and I'm glad we are having this discussion because I think it's necessary at this time.
Awesome, awesome. We're going to try and get our other panelist, Pastor Johnson, who we do believe was having some technical difficulties. We're going to see if he can join us here, but we've also invited Pastor Lorenzo Johnson, who he's the founder of the Community Youth Against Violence, graduate of Iowa State. I didn't know this about him. Former New York Jet, former New Orleans Saint. He is also an activist within the community, and we're grateful to have him. And hopefully he'll be joining us here directly. I'm quite sure we heard him a little earlier chatting. Once we do get him, I'm quite sure that he will let us know of his arrival. Pastor Johnson, are you? We see your name, sir. Can we see your face? Are we able to see you here on tonight? We'll dive into our conversation. We won't let.
I'm here.
Okay, well, good to see. Hey, how are you doing this evening, sir?
Man, hey, you know how it go, man. You know, when you get past 30 years old, them things ain't clicking like they used to click, you know. I had my Bluetooth in my pocket and it was going on through my Bluetooth.
Okay, well, listen, we do have you on. You're with us now. All of our panelists are here. And again, to our panelists, we're being viewed on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, as well as Twitter Live. And then we have some participants who have taken and they have logged on to our webinar here on this evening. So listen, we want to dive right into this, and just as Congressman Meek has stated, and as Attorney Stephen Johnson has stated, you know, it's a privilege, but then there's also this side where you're saddened to be together again and having this type of conversation. I want to pose this to each of you to give you an opportunity to give us your perspective, given the recent history of what we've experienced here in South Florida. And then, Congressman, even from a national perspective, as I mentioned, this is the 6-year anniversary. And you hate to even utilize the terminology of anniversary, but 6 years have passed since that mass shooting there in Charleston, South Carolina. And I'll start with you, Congressman. Can you, give us your perspective of what we've been experiencing here recently in South Florida, even from that national scope and perspective, and then we'll come around to each of our panelists to give each of us an opportunity to give us your perspective of what you've been viewing and what you've been feeling and seeing on this particular matter. Congressman Meek.
Well, again, thank you, Pastor Barber, for your leadership and your consistency in having a discussion and allowing those that want to learn more about what they can do and become a part of this discourse about a solution or working towards one. Nationally, we're experiencing a number of mass shootings. They're being documented now more than ever, and because of social media, people are made aware of those situations. It's just like, and I'm sure that that as we look at the police interaction with our young people, I'm pretty sure all of us on this panel have experienced white friends coming saying, wow, this really happens, and we grew up around this kind of situation. Growing up in North Liberty City, understanding what gunshots sound like on the regular, being in locations where mass shootings were taking place when I was a teenager, and we returned back to that location, need it be Gwen Cherry Park or Hatley Park or at some sort of musical event where there was a DJ. We get inoculated to it, and unfortunately, we find ourselves in this day and time with more powerful guns that high capacity weapons, and access to those weapons to individuals that are not mentally sound. That's happening throughout the country. And it's not just in Black communities, it's in white communities too. But when you find yourself in a situation where you have communities that are financially challenged and historically discriminated against, you find individuals carrying out law with these weapons. I can tell you years ago when I was a young state senator, we had the Cloud 9 gang that operated between 18th Avenue and 15th Avenue, and in the middle, from what they used to call the Pork and Bean projects to on the other side of 17th Avenue. And they were battling, and every night you would have 3 or 4 individuals that were either shot or killed, and I'm not exaggerating. And so we are experiencing that now, and it's a copycat kind of thing. When these things happen, it gives someone else that's unbalanced an idea that they should enforce the law or retaliation, and that's what shoots the numbers up. And so I don't want to really get long in the tooth on this, because I believe that as we continue to get further into this segment, that there'll be great ideas that will come out and great conversation. I just don't want to report on it. I want to make sure that we continue to have the conversation on how we can do something about it. And I'll close with this. I don't want to be a visiting pastor. Say I'm not going to be long, but I just want to say, especially from a small church, I just want to say that when we started talking about being about it, we started Mad Dads, Men Against Destruction, Defending Against Drugs and Social Disorder. And we rode bicycles in Liberty City, young and old, mainly Black men. We had Black females that were a part of our group, but it was like 95% Black men that were out there talking to young members of our community that needed that guidance, And even though we'll be talking to them and see an AK-47 leaning on the tree, but they respect the fact that we were out there unarmed, talking about what's happening in our community, the carnage, the young people that are being killed, the stigmatization that it put on our community, and that we had to bring a stop to it. And, these guys would be like, hey, Mr. Meek, and they're very respectful, and speaking to other folks who were out there with us, very respectful. That sense of community, that sense of, if a child or a young person or an innocent individual gets shot and it's not gang activity, knocking on doors, helping the police locate these individuals. Because the thing about our community, we'll turn our own children in when it comes down to a child being shot. And that's what we're finding in many of these cases. So I'm going to stop there and hopefully, Pastor, be able to home in a little further on some of the national issues that are taking place. I just left Miami this morning. I'm actually in Washington, D.C. tonight. And actually, we'll be talking to some policymakers later on about this very topic.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Planton. Can you chime in, your view, what you've been seeing and on our present issues that we find ourselves, confronted with now?
Thank you for the question. I think Congressman hit it exactly on the head, but I also want us to be very mindful of the concept of the backstories, right? So we have been quarantined, and our young people are coming out of COVID. They're coming out with some depression. They're coming out of with some isolation after having been deprived of peer-to-peer relationships. We have to admit that many of them have seen death from family members too, who have passed due to COVID. And then we have to understand that much of them were on social media, whether it be for school, whether it be for leisure. And a lot of the beef that we're seeing, we know originally starts from social media. So you start the beef from social media, and now we're out in the street, we're seeing one another face to face. And now if the beef isn't with you personally, I know my homeboy has beef with you, and I see you at a party, so I'm making a call. And that's compounded with all of the backstories that we already knew existed in our communities, right? So the hunger, the homelessness, the housing insecurity, the mental health issues, the drug issues. So everything else that we already had compounded in our communities, now that we're coming out and our young people are like, what do we do and how do we handle it, right? So our lack of conflict resolution only went from, our young people didn't do well with conflict resolution to begin with, having gone through all of this for about a year and being away from friends, being away from people who they feel that they can relate to face, automatically augments their level of anxiety, their level of, I need to show that I'm still in control. We've got territorial wars going on. We got PPP money going on. We've got fraud going on. The systems are drying up. Scam dollars are drying up. So there's a lot that's happening. This conversation, we're just seeing the remnants, right? But the reality is, we understand with the summer just starting off, we've always known that the summer and Christmas break is when you see the highest impact of gun violence. So we ended Memorial Day weekend with an increase in gun violence, and we are officially in the summer now, which is a season that we already know is already known for this. That puts us in a position of having to figure out, what do we do differently? I think the concern that we should definitely also look at is very similar to what we saw last year. This doesn't change until we all understand that we're all mutually accountable. The success of our children must be the responsibility of all of us, right? That concept of the village, we've got to go back to that. And we need to understand that each of these children, whether you're from these communities, not from the community, whether our privilege allows us to no longer drive through these communities and feel like people aren't doing their part, there are some internal conversations as a community that we must have. And that is why I think this is a great beginning.
Thank you so much, Doc. Johnson, attorney, we've had some dialogues and some talks about this, and you brought this before the board, the Black Affairs Board. give us, to this audience, this group of panelists, as well as people that are viewing us, and perhaps who'll go back and watch this video later. Give us your view and your take on what we're experiencing here now with, and I don't want to over sensationalize, but this rash of gun violence that we're experiencing here in South Florida.
Don't worry, I'll over sensationalize for you, because my ire, my anger, my lividness. By the way, it's at everybody, because we are not confronting something that Congressman Meek referred to, and that is the problem of gang violence in Miami-Dade County. We act like we belittle it almost. It's seen as, oh, it's neighborhoods and they come and they go, because Miami has experienced these things in the past, except for one thing. We've never experienced this in the era of social media. We've never experienced this in the era of songs about shooting your enemies going platinum, right? So we've never experienced this sort of violence in a way that the sensationalism is actually seen as a net benefit and amplified. The people on this on this particular meeting today probably don't even know there are whole Reddit pages. I didn't say Facebook, I didn't say Instagram, I said Reddit pages of which gangs and who's involved in which gangs have clicked up together. Because for those who are not aware, and I'll say it because it's something else I need to talk about, there are two large groups of smaller gangs who have clicked up and are now shooting at each other, right? We know it, those who are in the community, because we hear community rumblings and mumblings. The larger community doesn't know about it. And it's because we have been collectively afraid to face it and call it out. Dr. Planton mentioned our children, and we got to fight for our children, but we're losing our 18 to 24-year-olds, and they're not children. Those are young men who found themselves matriculated out of high school with nothing really to do. And there, but for the grace of God, go I, because I could have just as easily been that young man, except I matriculated into college. So I didn't have anything, I had something else to do, because all of us know that college can take up, there's a lot of wasting of time, but it can take up a lot of your time. There's an old saying, and I'm doing this because I'm talking to a pastor, that idle hands are the devil's playground. But we have left our 18 to 24-year-olds who have matriculated out of high school and who have decided not to continue their education in a world where there's not much for them because we haven't armed them appropriately. And then for many of us, we get alarmed when they take up arms against each other. But if I do not prepare a child for the world that he will face, then I'll leave that up to someone else. And unfortunately for us, sometimes that someone else is likes on Instagram or notoriety of being a hood legend, as it were. One of the things that I noticed from seeing these young men's and young women's Instagram posts is when they're mourning their dead, they say, "Long live," and insert name. So they're not saying long live to their friends who are alive. They're saying long live to the dead. And that means that we because this is an our problem, because this is our community, we have allowed that circumstance to develop. We have, through our inaction, because I'm not pointing fingers, I'm taking blame, right? Through our inaction, we have created a world where our kids believe that they better fend for themselves, and if they're good enough, they can get a rap deal and a Lambo, and everything's great. So we need to arm them with the manners and ways that they can improve their lives using their mind and their talents, because clearly they're talented. And we're not doing that. So when we get to solutions, I'm chock full of ideas. But I think first we have to start by saying, look, they might not be called Crips and Bloods yet. And I say might in parentheses because that's a subject for debate. But they might not be called that yet. But if you don't think we have the same problem that exists in Chicago or in LA, you're not paying attention. You're on mute.
Yeah, I'm so worried about Pastor Johnson. Pastor Johnson, if we could,
I'm here, but you got me. I'm here, but you got my video. You disabled my video.
So we're asking you to start your video. If you could start your video,
Okay.
Okay. Can you start your video? We want to see your face.
I'm
All
here.
right, there you go.
Here, man. I think you did that on purpose, man. And I'm riding as we go. I'm riding. I have a little league football program that I also have too. So I threw my suit on, and I got to be here because this is a subject that, man, I'm really very adamant about. I've heard everybody on the panel that spoke. I truly feel that that our problem is that we're not consistent. There's a lot of inconsistency. We don't want to do something for the day, and then tomorrow we leave that gap in there. And I do feel that one of the issues is that we may have we may get together and we may start out on something. I think that consistency is so important because it closed the gap. It closes the gap, and I know through the years things have changed. Parents have changed. So if we're being consistent, we can roll with the style, and we rolling with the style of things. That means that it's just like, when you come up the style, we got to roll with what we got to do because these new parents are not like they used to be. So we have to take a grip and connect. Because like with our program, our mission is to try to stop the developmental growth of it. Okay, if we could stop it, and that going back to the parents, where the parents are, we're not gonna look at this as a community. We're looking at this as a household issue. If we could get the household, if we could start doing like they do back in the days, and back in the days, the neighbor was able to spank you, and then you get another spanking when you get home. We know things have changed a whole lot now, so we have to come to grips and get a connection and be consistent. And I think a lot of our problem is from a community standpoint is that and what we're trying to do, we're not consistent, and we need to come together. See, if we come together, that closes the gap on this. All this gang stuff, all this stuff, and letting these people know that it's enough. It's enough for all this. So we have to, as people, we got to come together and not say, I'm doing my thing over here, I'm doing my thing. I think it's more powerful because that helped develop the consistency and help close the gap on things. And that's the main thing. If we could get that, if we could close the gap on the situation, and we could be consistent. We there's a lot of programs out there. There's a lot of good programs. A lot of people doing some great things, but we have to bring it together and be consistent with it, and that closes the gap. That means that they cannot come through it because we've got it locked in on both sides. So my main thing, and I think our problem is, and I think throughout the country, is that consistency means a lot. I mean, if we're consistent, we're not going to have a rally today and not have anything to do after that. Not continue. We may have a rah-rah rally, we may walk, we may protest, but after that, everything goes over. It's like, for example, a kid get killed. For example, kid get killed. After we'll rah-rah-rah for a minute. Then after a while, we don't have we got to come up with a plan. And now this is what I think. This is right now. I think that, I heard him talk about the gangs. We got to go to war on that. We got to go on the war. They got, we got to go on war like we in Afghanistan, like we in Vietnam somewhere. We got to go on war with these gangs. And we got to actually connect ourselves and put a task force together, put a community task force together, that everybody's doing this and doing that. That means that we're gonna close the gap on what we're trying to do and work this thing out. We have to come together. Too many people doing things on their own. We need to come together. Whatever you could do, we do, and let's lock this thing in. That's the problem. Now that's the confusing part. That's the upsetting part, because if we're not united together and we do not come together and close the gap, it's going to really, it's going to always come through together. We're always going to find these things happen. Not saying that this thing going to be picture perfect, but we got to close the gap on this side. We ever come together, man, that's very powerful.
All right, appreciate that, Pastor Johnson. Let me do this. I want to our panelists. I know, I want to stay within this an hour's time. I know we could really be on and go on and go on and go on. And so if we could, I want each of us, try and be as concise as we possibly can. I mean, I know all of us are very passionate about it, and I was sharing with the team, talking about putting this together. I said, listen, this is a discussion we can go on for hours. And so let me ask this. I want us to, each of you, to touch on one thing, and then we want to come back to the second thing. The first thing I want you to think about this. The first thing, the causes. What do you feel, why is it that we see this happening? Whether if you go back 6 years, if you go back, why do we see gun violence happening? I believe, Dr. Planton, we'll start there with you. You kind of started touching on some of this in your view of some of the recent history and given what we have, what we're experiencing. But can you touch on briefly, and then we want to go around and get everyone to touch on that. But then I also want you to start thinking about, what can we do to reach our youth? Stephen, you started touching on, forgive me for just using first name there, but, you started touching on some stuff. Yeah, I've heard of Reddit, but not from that perspective of some of those, that subculture that you have presented that finds itself thriving on Reddit, which a lot of people who are probably viewing us now on Facebook and YouTube, what have you, some of the elder saints looking at YouTube TV because their kids have helped them in a COVID time to get a smart TV to watch the worship service through YouTube. And so mother thinks she's doing something, but you just perhaps blew a lot of minds on today. So Dr. Planton, if you could get us going with, what do you feel are some of the causes? And if you want to touch briefly on what do you feel that we can do to reach our youth, but we want to try and be fair and give all of us a little bit of time to touch on this here on tonight. And then to our viewers that are viewing us on Facebook, if you want to put in your comment section, I know you can't do that on YouTube. If you want to tweet it, your question, we'll bring some of your questions up before our panelists here on this evening. Dr. Planton.
Thank you. I think, just to keep it pretty brief, I think when we have a generation that's telling us that they're not living, they're merely trying to survive, or they're saying we don't intend to be here past 17 or 18, those are words and those are phrases that should alarm all of us, because that tells you that you have a generation, whether they're kids, and I think, Mr. Johnson addressed it perfectly, 18 to 24-year-olds, right? Because we know many of the programmings that exist right now in this county, at the age of 21, 22, they stop. But what happened to our foster kids that are aging out the system that were not prepared, right? That we haven't prepared. And then we have to be very honest about the fact that the school to prison pipeline does not help our young children, right? So when we have policing in our schools and they're introducing our children to, relationships with police at a very early age, you have a county that, and again, Mr. Johnson can speak to this as an attorney, a practicing attorney, more than I can. Miami-Dade County and Broward County direct files more young people than anybody else, right? So we have to look at the entire system. We also need to look at the fact that there are some role reversals going in the household, which Pastor Johnson mentioned. The household is part of our problem, because if the kid is making more money than the parents, and the kid is bringing money home that the parent doesn't have control to find out where that money's come from. You carrying the iPhone 12 and you don't have the authority in your household to ask certain questions. You got certain cars pulling up in front of your driveway, and he or she is breaking you off some money, and you need the money. At that point, that child no longer sees themselves as a child. I'm your equal because you're taking the money and you know where the money's coming from. Then we have the reality of the virtual reality. Our children, their frontal lobe hasn't developed yet to fully understand that what we're watching on the many games that these children are playing right now, that at the end of the day, gun violence has become so normal, so sensationalized in these games that our kids cannot make the difference that if you shoot someone, they die, because they're expecting if they turn around the corner based on what they've been playing for so long, the body's gonna pop up in front of them, right? Based on GTA. So we have to understand that the reality is, and then there is this false normer that only poor Black communities are doing this. Understand that a lot of these monies and dollars that are running through our communities that's allowing for this to happen is coming from wealthy families. So there's a lot happening at one time. And so to answer your question, how do we begin to change it? One, we need to meet families where they are. We need to meet children where they are. We need to meet young people where they are versus us asking them to meet us where we are. Because our privilege and the things that we live are not the worlds that these kids are living. And I'll end on this note. When you have children that are actually on, and I say children because I'm thinking about all of them, they're all our babies, even young adults of 22, 24-year-olds that are living in this world of challenges. And I'm going to challenge you to sleep with an animal so that I can be part of the lit moment, because this generation validates themselves based on likes and shares. Unless we understand that and try to meet them there, we have failed them as well. You're on mute, Pastor.
Let me unmute myself. Attorney Johnson, if you would, share with us, what can we do to reach our youth? What do you feel is cause? And then we're gonna come back around to Congressman Meek.
So thank you, and I'm going to be real brief. Look, listen, my position is very simple. The old ways won't work because this is not the crack. This ain't the crack wars, right? These kids are not shooting each other over drug corners, which is actually something I can understand because it has a capitalistic motive. That's not why they're doing this. I wrote a post on Facebook. I made it real clear. These kids are shooting each other essentially, in the end of the day, for clout, for notoriety, to demonstrate to those around them that, yes, I am a shooter. It's a choice. There's a song I referenced a little bit earlier. The name of the song is Who I Smoke. It's really popular. Everybody on here has either heard it or the kids have heard it, right? The song is from a genre called drill. All of that's fine, and I never blame music for anything. But we have to understand and acknowledge that our music is not influencing the culture, it does reflect the culture. Who I Smoke is a song where individuals name murdered Black men and claim responsibility for it. Real people, not made up stuff like Biggie did or Tupac did. No. These are real people. The rappers at El Mula, they're rapping about real people. There are kids getting shot because somebody else put out a diss record. Understand what's happening so you understand how we deal with it. Again, I'm not blaming drill. I'm going to point out Broward County just gave Kodak Black his own day, but your kids and your grandkids are not going to play around with Sniper Gang, right? So you understand that there's real consequences to all this play stuff that we think and we see. As far as what we can do, there are a lot of things we can do, but the first thing, as I said, is we have to acknowledge that this is not the same problem that we dealt with back in the early 90s, which actually was a bloodier period, mind you. So I'm glad we're being proactive. Some of the things, and Dr. Planton referenced it, in Miami-Dade County right now, after a kid ages out of Optimus, there's nothing for them to do, right? So you can play sports up until about 13. By the time you get to high school, sports becomes competitive So if you're not good at sports, there's less for you to do. How are we nurturing our Black men and our Black women's minds? There are white kids across town that are making money on crypto. Where are kids? Why aren't they participating? There are kids coding, right? What are we doing within our communities to say, you know what? I'm not proud that the hood is scary. I'm not proud that I can't walk back to back blues, right? That's nothing to be proud of because that's my Black community. And I want to be proud of, hey, look at this kid, he just developed an app. That's what I want to be proud of. So we need to change our conversations about, it's not about the mamas, it's not about the daddies, it's not about any of that. We're not arming our kids to survive in a world that, to be honest, many of us don't understand ourselves because it's changing so fast. When you confront a problem, you got to confront a problem understanding what your issue is. So, in conclusion, it's got to be holistic. I need cops locking folks up quickly. I need the community reaching out to young Black men, getting them jobs, giving them something to do. We need to figure out what we're going to do with our 13 to 18-year-olds, because if they're not athletes, they are not celebrated in this town. Not in the Black community. The smart kid is forgotten and ushered off to college quietly. We have to change that. That's on us. That's not on white folks. That's not on the mayor. That's on us. And we have to demand from all of our county and cities that if there's a neighborhood I know is bad, clean it up. Right? We should not be afraid to walk through any Black neighborhood because they're not afraid to walk through Coral Gables. They're not afraid to walk through, everywhere else. Why are we afraid to walk through our own community? I refuse to be afraid, and my neighbors are Black, just like most of y'all's. That's unacceptable. And folks have shrugged it off too long. So we should take this as a wake-up call, and I agree with Pastor Johnson in closing. It's going to need all of us, and we're going to have to come together. So I don't care if you're fighting on a different front. Tell me how I can support you, because I'm going to keep fighting the same way I'm fighting and saying the same things I'm saying.
Right. Listen, Congressman Meek, and thank you so much, Attorney Johnson. Congressman Meek, we have our honorable school board member, Dorothy Bendros Mendigal. She chimed in and she said, Congressman Meek, I wish you would have mentioned the support of the Scott Carver residents. And what she said, Lily Carmichael's Evans Elementary
Lily
School.
C. Carmichael Evans
Lily
Elementary
C,
School.
yeah. I'm reading this. I thought she was talking about someone from way back in Mom's. So,
No.
but I didn't want for the honorable school board member to she's viewing and to send her support. And so I wanted you to know that she sent her support, and then also just to let you all know that we have some viewers that have chimed in all the way from Atlanta, Georgia.
Good.
And so so Congressman, give us your take. Give us your take on you feel that the causes, how can we reach our youth? And I know you've served locally, you served from a state level and a national level. And so there's some from those different perches that you stood upon, your view. It's a little different from maybe some of ours. Can you share with us here?
Well, Pastor Barbara, I just want to just say very quick that, and I'm glad that Dr. Bendros Mendigal chimed in, because she was principal of Lily C. Carmichael Elementary School. We really had kind of, how would you say, being a son of a wonderful woman, a national treasure like Congresswoman Carrie Meek, who some may, not know her story, but, the fact that she, segregated South, had to go to University of Michigan after leaving FAMC for an education because of segregation. Taught at FAMU, taught at Bethune-Cookman, taught 30 plus years at Miami-Dade Community College, starting at Miami Northwestern, single mother, bringing up 3 kids in Liberty City. we all have stories and we all have background. Ms. Mendengal engaged those parents that lived in Scott Carver homes. And she grew up in a product, from our neighborhood. So we all have stories. You notice at the beginning, I didn't talk about a piece of legislation that I carried in Tallahassee or in Washington. I talked about being on the ground, and as Attorney Johnson spoke, not being scared of our people. We put our lives on the line every day. Our children put our lives on the line, their lives on the line every day. You talk to people like, Patrick Range about some of the families that he run across. And Pastor Johnson said, I have this little league piece that I'm doing, but this was important. That kind of consistency that he spoke of how do we get hands-on? We can't legislate our way out of this. The only way we can do it is what we're doing here today, this evening. And I'm so glad that we're putting in our own sweat equity. I mean, no one's on here saying, well, I got to go do this panel because I'm going to get $500 for being on this panel. No, I'm going to do this panel because I am concerned about what's happening in my community. So we have to take ownership for that. And other communities see our community, quote unquote, Black community, and that encompasses everyone as far as I'm concerned. First of all, what are you doing? Black woman, Black man, what are you doing? This is your people, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson talks about depth perception, that we have to care about what happens to the next person. So I'm not preaching to the folks that we have on our panel, and I'm not even preaching to the folks that are listening and watching us right now, because the fact that they're listening and watching shows concern and that they're willing to do something. So I would do something very simple. And Dr. Mendengal was a part of this, and many others were a part of this. Yes, it's not the crack wars, but we made government uncomfortable when we were doing all we could do. We had every month, once a month, we had the police district, I think 678, whatever it is, that zone that I talked about. We would have the crime prevention commission, and we would come in on a Saturday right there in the middle of one may call, old school pork and beans or what have you, in that facility. And call the police chief, call the mayor, call all of them. We'll sit around in a circle. We'll talk about what's not working. We'll talk about what's working. The community was there. The parents were there. The residents of that community was there. And they saw some fight in us. Right now we're inoculated. We see this and we read about it and say, and y'all know as pastors, oh, pastor, what are we going to do? And we mean, they're looking for you to lead when individuals can lead themselves. So I will close with this. Need to be a church, need to be a C3, need to be an organization. Like we have federal and state empowerment zones. Say, okay, my church is here and here's my perimeter. And folks may talk about, the ministry and reaching out and doing it. And it's not all just in the church. We have to think, even as it relates to social media, even if we say we're going to take responsibility for this particular neighborhood, we're going to knock on doors, because it's not about all just crime and justice. This also has some mental health counseling involved, also opportunities, broader opportunities that we have to bring to our young people. I didn't leave the country. I'm not talking about really travel abroad until I was 36 years old and I became a member of Congress. Going to the Bahamas is not traveling abroad. Being in Stuttgart, Germany, being in the Middle East, going to Europe, going to Asia, that's going abroad. That's understanding what's going on. We have people in our community haven't even gone to the beach yet. Miami Beach, okay? They don't have that exposure. So what are we going to do as a community? So I know, Pastor, that you have a tough job, because you're asking us to be brief, but the passion is so high on this. And that it's hard to be brief about something you really care about. Right. And it hits you emotionally. Yes. And I wouldn't be here in Washington tonight if it wasn't for those coaches that coached me, Pastor Johnson, over at Gwinnett Cherry Park, the CYC track program. You know, if it wasn't for my neighbor, Mr. Sonny, who didn't even have a high school education, but took me fishing from time to time. It wasn't for that sense of community. So we can't legislate that. That's something that we got to do. So I'm sorry, I'm gonna stop there. Y'all hit me emotionally with the Miss Menegal. Dr. Menegal knows she's wrong for talking about back when, because she's like my mother. She's my other mother, and I love her dearly. And I appreciate the work that she's doing and the others are doing on the board to try to bring about change and better opportunities for our young people.
Absolutely. We wanted to definitely, you know, when we saw her making her comments and viewing, and you know, listen, people are concerned. It's like you said, it's hitting a chord, and you have people taking time out of their busy schedules, even on this evening, that are sitting wherever they may be at viewing to hear what we have to say, because they want to hear the voices. And then for the honorable school board member, you know, to chime in and to share what she had to share. You know, we're grateful, and definitely wanted to let you know that, Congressman, how you know your time is appreciated here on tonight. Pastor Johnson, I know I'm coming to a pastor, going to a pastor and saying, Rev, you know, don't be long. You know, that's hard. You know, and then he's a Baptist preacher too. You see him over the laugh. Y'all see him. We got witnesses on the panel. Folks say you asking the Reverend to not be long. Rev, show them how a preacher can be concise. Unmute yourself, sir. Johnson, Pastor Johnson, you got to unmute yourself.
All right, okay, I do appreciate that welcome, man. I appreciate that. I want to say something to Mr. Meeks there. Mr. Meeks, your family was like my family. Me and your sisters growing up together, and we came. We used to we all just skip school together, all of us. So Lucy's
hey, you. He putting it all out there. Hey. Go ahead.
Wait, Pastor Johnson. I didn't want to. When you started talking about earlier, the thing that cracked me up, and God bless you. The thing I love about our people and you is the fact that we can have some humor in this. When you say, you know, Pastor Barbara, you know, when you get over 30, I think you can go a little higher than that.
Well, you know, with what's going on in our city now, and we're very angry, man. We have to laugh. We have to keep it going. And I think that the humor is so important, along with our mission. And I do feel that even our course on this mission of all of us is out here as activists, and we're out here trying to save lives of our children and families. But, you know, my main thing is, and with our organization, Community Youth Against Violence, what we basically trying to do is, we know that a lot of situations there's some hope with it, but what we're trying to do, we want to work with the parents at the beginning, you know, when when they go through a fertile stage, and if we could get to the fertile stage of that particular child, in terms of before he gets to the next level, we could probably get a little control. But what's happening is this: if a parent, I heard someone talking about the TV, you know, like, you know, these parents, if we could get to the parents as well, and those are the main thing, because a 12-year-old kid, 13-year-old kid shouldn't be bringing no TV home, and parents sit home and watch a movie with them. So if we could also develop the mindset and actually go to the root of it, we could stop the development of growth of it. That helps too. If we could start from the bottom of it, where we can hit these parents, because the parents, like I said, it's not the same no more. So if we could put the energy and working on these new parents, I think that also slow down the development of crime, because it all comes from parenthood. It worked at parenthood. I'm not saying it's going to be picture perfect, but a lot of it comes from parenthood. And I heard someone say that kids begin. I heard the Dr. Shirley talked about how the kids start doing things, and now they just equal as a parent in the house. And I think that says a whole lot, because now the kid in the house, he paying the bills, he making more money than the mom and dad, and all the mom, rather. I say the mom, he's bringing home the home, he bringing the grocery in. So there's no control there. And we have to work on the fact of just actually getting the control, getting the parent to get control of the household once again. And that's important. And I think that'll really help the situation in terms of getting to the parents and actually work along with the parents and developing some type of structure in the household, because kids are running households.
All right. Thank you so much, Pastor Johnson. I want to acknowledge we had a couple of questions that did come in to the panelists we have viewers who are actually logged into the webinar, and so they get a chance to actually interact via the webinar. Pastor Charles Dinkins, who's another in our community who has been putting in work and labor with young people and early childhood development. One question that he did put out there was, do you have data that outlines the common risk factors in the lives of the identified shooters or youth we think are at risk becoming a shooter? I know I don't have necessarily any data on hand, whether it be tonight. I tend to lean to those experts in those areas. I don't know, Attorney Johnson, Dr. Palin, any of our panelists want to try to publicly address that here in this set.
I was going to point out the CDC, the reason why I think that we live in amazing times is any question you have, Google is your absolute friend. The CDC actually published a list of risk factors for youth violence and youth violent offenders, one of which, angrily enough, is low IQ. But the other one, which it's silly, peer and social risk factors, association with delinquent peers, involvement in gangs, social rejection by peers, lack of involvement in conventional activities, poor academic performance, and low commitment to school and school failure. Listen, I'm gonna let everybody know, I fit all of those when I was in high school. And everybody, and not alone, right? I don't necessarily like all the scientific data, because every black man knows a black man that has traveled that road. Some of them work with them now, right? Because the black community has pitfalls that the white community, for magical reasons, doesn't, right? So I'm a bit dismissive, but I'll defer to Dr. Planton or someone else who believes in data like that. But for me, I don't believe in it, because even though it took me 9 years to graduate undergrad, I did, right? Because my path wasn't a traditional path, because we not raised by wealthy white people. That's, it's just kind of how life growing up without much is. So that's my perspective on that.
Can I just real quick, Dr. Planton, and this is a question for you. I'm not in any way trying to be moderator here, but I think Brother Johnson hit on something, and you talked about counseling in your opening comments. And we talk about the social media piece and all the different aspects of it. What is happening on the law enforcement side, even though folks are doing all this talking and wanting people to know and take credit for the violence, these individuals will be apprehended and will be arrested and will go through the criminal justice system. And I don't know if there's a discussion amongst our youth or the mental health community or the safety net community of not allowing that social media story to end with the act and the bragging, but continue through the criminal justice system and what has happened to this individual and happened in the family. And I'm thinking, Dr. Dr. Barber, I can call you that. there may be a need for some sort of summit amongst young people. Now, I'm not talking about your top of the class young folk. I'm talking about your young, at risk, had those individuals that is gone through the criminal justice system in some way or some form, either being fingerprinted, ID'd, or what have you. Have them say, how do we stop this, and how do we do it on social media to show what you see here is not the end story. The end story is the fact you will be going to federal prison. You will be charged, directly prosecuted as an adult. Everything that goes on, and then everyone gets upset with Kathy Rundle when Kathy Rundle's saying, hey, I'm just responding to what's happening in the community. When I have a grieving mother coming in saying, take that dangerous person off the street, not now, but right now. And then some kids who don't fall in that public enemy number one category end up getting that kind of treatment because they're going through the system and they're represented by public defenders. And I love public defenders, but they're overwhelmed. That's what's happening in Louisiana. You talk about the national footprint. They have a very, and I tell you, Democrats and Republicans, they don't fund those offices like they fund prosecutors' offices. So they're overwhelmed, and our kids end up being the casualties, which then lead into more poverty into our community. Going back to what, Doc, you were talking about, wait a minute, my phone is better and bigger than your phone, Mom, Dad, so who are you to talk to me? Plus, I'm paying the light bill here. I'm sorry. I just wanted to mention that because I know the young people, we got to figure out how we get into that.
Dr. Planton, do you want to chime in on that? And as she jumps in on that, Congressman, you hit on something that, I told you guys we could be on here all night long and talk ad nauseum, that whole piece of when the state attorney's office arrests an individual, but then the community turns around and say, you got to let them out or free them, or y'all hard on those persons. And then sometimes, unfortunately, the community really doesn't know all that an individual has done, and so on and so forth. I mean, but that's so Dr. Planton, come, jump in and save me from saying something that perhaps will take us down a whole nother path.
No, I think there are three things that I think we need to be very mindful of. First is to answer Reverend Dickinson's perspective that I think in order for us to stop gun violence, we need to look at it from a cradle to career, not even cradle to college, it needs to be cradle to career, because after we get them into college, have we empowered them? Like Mr. Johnson said, how do you get a job and keep a job, right? If we haven't done all of that, yeah, you got the degree, but you know not what to do with it. So that's the first point. I think the second point, and I'm going to kind of, piggyback on Mr. Johnson's comment again, I'm very hesitant when it comes to data because two things about that. Number one, data and evidence-based. We love those terms, right? Evidence-based curriculums, those national models, we love them, but oftentimes they're not taking into account the diversity of Miami-Dade, the makeup of Miami-Dade, and they're oftentimes not even being applied or researched in our communities, but being forced to be adapted in our community. So I'm very, very mindful about that. And then I want us to always be mindful that every data can be utilized in whatever way we want it to be utilized. And every data is actually somebody's personal story. And we should never lose the backstory for wanting to hold on to the data to fit whatever narrative it is we want it to fit. The Miami-Dade County has, of course, I'm not sure if it went up, but it used to be the 6 EWIs, the early warning indicators, that literally say to us, hey, these are some signs that says this child is in trouble, not necessarily saying in trouble to be a shooter, but some signs that throw up the red flags and say we should be concerned, we should be mindful. As far as Congressman's question, I think it's a great idea, but part of what we run into, anybody under 18, you're gonna have some people that throw in the line of confidentiality. We can't even disclose who they are as juveniles. And then we have to be very mindful that it is all about the clout. And I think Stephen said that best. It's all about the clout. It's all about that lit moment. Remember, this generation glorifies death. They don't glorify being alive. You put cuffs on a teenager that's going around the corner, they already screaming, free my dog. He ain't going nowhere but around the corner because we trying to break up the fight, right? We haven't done anything yet, and we already got the t-shirts out talking about rest in peace or free my dog ASAP. So we need to understand that whole social media concept for them, albeit there are opportunities for us to utilize this to make the point. But what tends to happen is the kids who need to get the message aren't the ones we're often reaching out to. We like to stick with our cream of the crop, but those second chance program kids, those kids that really need to get the bulk of the conversation, are often not in the space, and we're often not listening to them. Henceforth, why I said, in order for us to make some changes, we need to be willing as professionals to sit down and actually meet young people where they are. And maybe that's where some of this conversation that Congressman is talking about, how can we utilize social media, not from our good kids, but for the kids who are 1 foot in, 1 foot out, that's trying to determine whether or not they want to be in a gang and somebody's pulling them another way, making sure that they know somebody's willing to listen and we want to hear what they have to say in order to change the narrative.
Awesome. Listen, I'm conscious, I'm becoming more and more conscious as a pastor of time. I'm becoming more conscious of it. Before you caught me, Pastor Johnson, they would have caught me in my 30s. Would you say before, when you get over 30? When I was under 30, but they would have caught me when I was under 30. I used to preach for an hour, and I wouldn't, people could fall out and everything. I still go on and keep preaching. and, but I want to afford all of us, and to make we can't, Rome was not built in a day, as that old adage goes. We can't resolve all of the issues, but I do believe between our audience on Facebook, audience on YouTube, and here on Twitter Live, and as well as on the webinar, we begin to put out some thoughts. Like I said, we had people that were sharing that they were watching, all the way from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm quite sure people will go back because these videos become archived on those various platforms, and some will share with others. But I want us to begin doing a wrap up. I want us to begin doing a wrap up here. And if you could wrap up in such a way that talks about a model of hope, because we talked about a pathway to peace. Are there models of hope where we in our community can perhaps implement in South Florida as we continue to work at this? And I began by saying that, listen, it's going to have to be a part 2. So we do this once a month. And I definitely want to, perhaps, whether it be this same panel or others, that we add into this conversation, and we talk about that. And so, Congressman, if you would kick us up, or let me start, because Pastor Johnson, you kind of disappeared for a moment. I saw the ceiling of the rooftop of your car. I didn't know whether or not you was trying to teach one of the kids the proper way of tackling, proper form of tackling. So if you would unmute yourself, and we're going. Congressman.
While Pastor's trying to figure out how to hit the mute button, that's going to take about 30 seconds. I'm just going to say very quickly,
that's a low blow, man. I'm going to tell you,
Pastor Bob. Pastor Bob, I just want to tell you, you're my lifelong friend, Missy X Brown, your member. I said, if I do this, I'm too emotional about this, not, because I'm supposed to be, I told you I was meeting with some folks, and I'm supposed to sign off like 10 minutes to 8. But, I want to be on this. I want to talk about this because it's about solution. You follow me? So I commit to whatever, discussion we want to have virtually or what have you. I mean, of course, I'm right there in Miami. And I commit to that because we can't get it all in now. But I love the passion, that I'm seeing from the comments and also from the panelists. So thank you. Please don't take my leaving as a lack of concern and I want to thank my panelists because I know all of you in your own right and the work that you're doing. I want you to continue to do that. It ain't over until God calls us home. So we still here. And it doesn't matter what you're driving or what you have in the bank or who knows you or whatever your title is. We're here for such a time as this. And the consistency, Pastor, I'll leave with this. We just have to be consistent. We have to be consistent. My heart hurts when I see a Black family wailing at the loss of a child. I can't even take it. I'm emotional just talking about it. So that's the kind of passion we got to have when we wake up in the morning, not just what's going on in our central air unit, wherever we're living, but what's going on with our neighbors. So thank you so very much. And I commit, I'll be happy to come back on.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Congressman. And much success in your next meeting that you have to attend.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So Pastor Johnson, if you could, now just because the congressman jumped off, don't mean that you're gonna preach an hour like I used to preach when I was.
No, we won't.
No. Share with us a pathway forward. Yeah, share with us a pathway forward.
The congressman just hit me in the stomach. Now you just hit me side the head. But what the congressman he made a great phrase here. Consistency, like what we talk about. I think that we all have the great ideas of doing things and this and that, but I think that our problem is our problem is the people that trying to do the thing is that if we can develop the consistency, and I like to talk. I like what you're doing here, because we have to talk about it as well, but being consistent in our talks and being consistent in our walk. So if we're consistent, I think that helps, and that word consistency means so much, because consistency is power. And I think that if we could move and everybody, we got our ideas and we could bring them all together, I think we could conquer.
Amen. Amen. Appreciate you, Pastor Johnson. Appreciate you, Pastor Johnson. Attorney Johnson. Models of hope. That we can learn from. Talk to me, my friend.
So I think there are programs that work. Look, folks have heard about the Harlem Education Zone. Newark, New Jersey has a violence reduction program through the Newark Community Street Team, which and both of these overlap on one thing that I think is really important to mention in the comments, which deals with mentorship, which I think is really important, particularly for young Black men. The reason why the lack of sports hurts us as a community is because that means that you're losing other men in men's lives. There's no one to pull you back and say, you know what, that's not a good idea. The only other point that I'd raise is that we have to support the mentors who are out there doing these things. So with your time and your money, you should be supporting the organizations that are on the street. So that includes, I know the Circle of Brotherhood is out there. I know that Liberty City Optimists and Optimist programs throughout the county are out there. 100 Black Men in South Florida. There's 5,000 role models. We need to support, and let me not forget our churches, right? Because many of our churches also run mentoring programs designed to accomplish this very thing. We need to get into our boys' lives. We need to stop blaming our women for that absence. It's not their fault. A woman can raise a boy child just fine. But we understand as men that young men often are afraid of their own shadow and will act out of fear. We need someone needs to be there to tell them the world is not a place to be afraid of.
Dr. Planton, can you share with us any models of hope, pathway forward?
I think Stephen hit a lot of the ones that I was going to talk about, particularly the Harlem one. We know that right now in Miami-Dade, you have the GVI model, right, which the mayor's office in the county has invested a lot of money in, which is the gun violence intervention model. We know that for the past 5 or 6 years, there's also been the model around the Together for Children model, bringing different entities and groups together. Now, the many people are still there. There's been some back and forth, but the model does exist. You have several of the coalitions, the We Rise model that exists under Mr. Fair, right? You have the Overtown Youth Coalition. So there are models that exist. The problem is we're not shy of models. It's not that we're short of models or that we don't have models in Miami-Dade that exist. I think what we first need to really push is that everyone has a role to play, right? Everyone has a role to play, whether you are a man, you are a woman, you are a young adult. There's some way, somehow, that you can give of your time, your talent, your treasure, because no one cares until you can show people how much you care. That's just the reality to it, right? The second thing I think that we can do better as a community is respect each other's lanes. There is no reason why all of us have to be social service providers. There's a need for trainers. There's a need for coaches. There's a need for music. There's a need for tech. There's a need for coding. There's a need for the church. All of us don't have to do the same thing. And I think at the point that we begin to realize that there is strength by building and partnering and cultivating the proper partnerships, that I am as strong as Stephen is. I am as strong as, 5,000 role models. I'm as strong as Dickinson's camp. Whatever it is, but the problem becomes is we're all fighting it. It's almost as if it's designed for us to do this, to fight for the same pot of money. It becomes territorial and it's about the money, and we forget the why we all got into this. So if we begin to diversify and let the people that have the money do the work, but understand that collectively it takes all of us and bring all of us to the table, like Pastor Johnson was saying, I think respecting each other's lane allows us to respect what we each bring to the table. It's not enough for us to be at the table, but we have to respect what each one brings to the table. And then I close with the last point, that changing the narrative, no Calvary's coming to save us. So we need to own up to that. So whatever narrative that's going to happen, whatever shift, whatever paradigm shift that's going to happen, it falls upon the shoulders of people that took the time to be here, that are on this watch list, that attended, but more importantly, the greater community. And it is going to take all of us to shift the narrative, because we are all indeed interconnected.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Amen.
Dr. Planton brought up something that makes me even want to go and talk a little bit more when she talked about, because there are many groups, activists that are out there, and this definitely lets me know we definitely have to do a part two to this, that are out there, and there's no reason for the various community-based organizations and groups to have their turf wars, because then we become no better than the people that we claim to be making an attempt to reach. We're just as guilty, but without guns, but with our words, and then the building up of these concretizing, if you will, or making the walls of our silos that much more firm and resistant, to where no one can climb over the wall and work with us and collaborate with us, or we having a willingness to collaborate with another. But when it comes down to this particular issue, it does not matter your zip code, doesn't matter your name, doesn't matter what organization you give leadership to. It can touch you, or it can touch someone near you, but definitely the community in which we claim that we're giving service to. And so allow me to do this, because I want for people that are on tonight to thirst and want to come back and to hear more, and then to even say, hey, listen, how perhaps you've been sitting on the sideline, perhaps you've been sitting on your couch, and you've been just being informed when you turn on the media and the news, and you shake your head and you keep living your life, but you're living your life in a community that is being infected and affected by what is going on. And eventually, as this disease called gun violence, if we allow for it to continue to run wild or run rampant, Pastor not Woodrow Jenkins, but Pastor Jeffrey Mack, who was viewing, he said it's time to put our talk into action. He's absolutely right. And we need people who are sitting on the sidelines, some of the mothers and fathers where it's not your children or you have no children. You have to open up your mouth and say, listen, how can I get involved? How can I help? How can I serve? There are a plethora of organizations, even those represented here on tonight, some that are viewing and others that are out there that are really doing the work. So listen, let me do this. I want to thank all of our panelists. I want to thank those that chimed in, the comments that have come in through the chat on the webinar, for those who have made comments here through Facebook. And I know I kind of peeped over to YouTube and saw a few people on YouTube watching. And I know there's not room for you to comment and chat there in YouTube, but I thank you. And then for those who are fancy on my level that are viewing on Twitter Live, you might be fancy on Attorney Johnson's level, and we got to find out how can we get on Reddit. You know, oh my goodness, I'm like, oh, I'm behind. So, but I want to thank you. I want to thank Attorney Johnson for taking out time of your schedule. Dr. Planton, thank you. Pastor Lorenzo Johnson, thank you. I thank each of you, and to former Congressman Meek, for his time, and then for the words that you have added, the advice that you have given, and the hope that you have given, that there are people who look like us that's in this fight. And I want to thank each and every one of you on tonight. Thank all of our viewers, everyone for chiming in. We'll be back next month for our third Thursday talks. And I guess I'm committing it's going to be a part 2. We want to keep this dialogue going. All right. Thank you very much. God bless each and every one of you. To our panelists, you guys hold on for 1 minute here. We want to just